It's alive! Mel Brooks's Young Frankenstein wasn't just a comedy. It was a gothic masterpiece that paid tribute to classic horror while delivering some of the funniest scenes in movie history. But behind the laughs, the production was full of surprises, battles, and bizarre choices. Let's dig into 20 weird facts you didn't know about Young Frankenstein, 1974. Gene Wilder didn't pitch Young Frankenstein with a polished story or fancy proposal. He carried around a simple idea scribbled in his notebook. What if Dr. Frankenstein's grandson was a respectable doctor who wanted nothing to do with the family curse, until he inherits the castle and gets pulled back into the madness? That tiny thought eventually grew into a film script. When Wilder finally shared it with Mel Brooks, Brooks immediately recognized the brilliance. Without that worn notebook, this film likely would never have existed. It wasn't just a comedy pitch, it was the foundation for one of cinema's most unique parodies.
That's Frankenstein.
I beg your pardon?
My name. It's pronounced Frankenstein.
Unlike most of his comedies, Mel Brooks made the unusual decision not to appear in Young Frankenstein. He worried that audiences would be pulled out of the gothic mood if he popped up in a cameo. Instead, Brooks wanted the film to look and feel like a lost Universal monster movie, where the comedy came from the characters rather than his presence. However, Brooks couldn't resist sneaking in. He provided several sound effects like the howling wolf and a few background shrieks. His voice is in the film, even though his face isn't. For Brooks, this was about preserving tone above all else.
Werewolf?
There.
What?
Werewolf.
By 1974, Hollywood had almost completely abandoned black and white filmmaking. Studio executives at 20th Century Fox begged Brooks to shoot Young Frankenstein in color, convinced audiences wouldn't pay for something that looked old-fashioned. But Brooks knew that the entire parody hinged on authenticity. The film needed to look exactly like a 1930s horror picture. He stood his ground and demanded it be shot in black and white. Cinematographer Gerald Hirschfeld used old-school lighting techniques to nail the Gothic style. Against the odds, Brooks won. That choice gave the film its timeless look and remains one of its most celebrated qualities today. The famous laboratory equipment wasn't created for Young Frankenstein. It was actually the original machinery from the 1931 Frankenstein. Designer Kenneth Strickfaden had kept the Tesla coils, sparking towers, and giant electrical switches in storage for decades. When Brooks reached out, Strickfaden happily loaned it all. This gave the reanimation scenes an incredible authenticity that no replica could have matched. It also blurred the line between parody and tribute. Audiences weren't just laughing at an imitation, they were watching the same props that terrified audiences in the 1930s. That direct connection to film history is one of the movie's hidden treasures.
Wait. A toast.
Although Gene Wilder and Mel Brooks were close friends, the making of Young Frankenstein was not without tension. They argued passionately over jokes, pacing, and even individual words in the script. Wilder once got so frustrated that he kicked Brooks out of the set after a heated debate. But instead of damaging their friendship, the fights actually made the movie stronger. Each clash forced them to refine the comedy and find the sharpest possible delivery. The battles were exhausting, but they produced a script filled with wit and precision. Their creative conflict was messy, but it was the secret ingredient to greatness.
That brain that you gave me, was it Hans Delbruck? No.
Number 6. Igor's moving hunch was pure mischief. Marty Feldman, who played Igor, decided to test how much attention people were paying to his character. He began moving his hump from shoulder to shoulder between takes, without telling anyone. When Mel Brooks finally noticed, he thought it was hilarious and decided to keep the gag in the movie. Audiences never knew whether Igor's shifting hump was an intentional joke or a mistake, which only made it funnier. Feldman's little prank became one of the most memorable running gags in the film. Sometimes comedy gold happens not through careful planning, but through spontaneous actor mischief.
You must be Igor.
No, it's pronounced Igor.
Number 7. Walk This Way inspired Aerosmith's hit song. One of the most quoted lines in the film came from Igor. After saying "walk this way," he demonstrates his crooked limp, prompting Dr. Frankenstein to imitate him. This small gag unexpectedly shaped pop culture. A few years later, Aerosmith was in the studio struggling with a song. Someone mentioned the Young Frankenstein line, and Steven Tyler immediately thought it would make the perfect title. The phrase became "Walk This Way," one of the band's biggest hits. A comedy parody about Frankenstein directly inspired a rock anthem that went on to dominate radio and later fuel Aerosmith's legendary career resurgence.
Of course, the rates have gone up.
Of course. Of course. I'm sure we'll get along splendidly. Oh.
During the famous "Puttin' on the Ritz" musical number, Gene Wilder had a hard time holding his composure. Every time Peter Boyle's monster belted out his loud, off-key growl, Wilder would lose control and burst into laughter. They had to reshoot the sequence dozens of times because he simply couldn't keep a straight face. In the final film, if you watch closely, you can still see Wilder barely holding it together. Ironically, that raw struggle to suppress laughter made the scene even funnier. Wilder's inability to contain his joy became part of the charm, showing how ridiculous and wonderful the moment really was. Number 9. Peter Boyle almost quit over the makeup. Playing the monster wasn't all fun and laughs for Peter Boyle. The makeup process was grueling, taking hours every single day. He had to endure heavy prosthetics, thick costume layers, and long days under hot set lights. At one point, Boyle told friends he was considering walking away from the role because it was so physically exhausting. But he stuck with it, determined to bring the monster to life. His dedication paid off. Boyle delivered a performance that balanced comedy with pathos, making the monster both terrifying and oddly sympathetic. It's hard to imagine anyone else surviving that process so well. The hilarious blind hermit sequence almost didn't make it into the film. The original cut ran long, and Brooks considered removing it entirely for pacing. But Gene Wilder fought to keep it, convinced it would be one of the funniest moments. On set, Brooks and Wilder reworked the dialogue and added gags like the spilled soup, the broken wine jug, and the cigar lighting disaster. Gene Hackman, who played the hermit, shocked audiences with his comedic timing since he was usually known for tough, dramatic roles. The scene stayed in, and today it's considered one of the funniest and most unforgettable in the film.
A toast to, yes, long friendship.
For the "Puttin' on the Ritz" routine, Peter Boyle had to learn tap dancing, even though he wasn't a trained dancer. Choreographers worked with him for weeks to teach him basic steps, knowing that the comedy relied on his clumsy execution. The goal wasn't to make Boyle look polished, but to make his awkward rhythm funny while still recognizable as tap. The result was the perfect blend of competence and disaster, making the monster's performance hilarious and unforgettable. The fact that Boyle pulled it off despite his lack of dance training speaks to his incredible dedication to the role. To make the film feel authentic, Brooks chose to shoot many sequences in actual European castles instead of relying only on studio sets. The Gothic staircases, stone corridors, and drafty interiors gave the film a chilling atmosphere that was impossible to fake. While this choice added realism, it also made filming uncomfortable. Cast and crew had to work long nights in freezing, damp conditions, and actors complained about shivering through takes. Still, the payoff was worth it. The authentic locations helped Young Frankenstein look indistinguishable from the classic horror films it was parodying, cementing its place as both homage and comedy.
I am Frau Blucher.
Every time Frau Blucher's name is mentioned, horses neigh in terror. Audiences thought it was a silly gag with no meaning, but in fact, Blucher is a German slang term for glue. The joke is that horses are afraid because her name reminds them of horse glue. Mel Brooks admitted later that he wasn't sure if audiences would pick up on it, but the absurdity of the horse's reaction worked regardless. The mystery only made it funnier, since people argued for years about the real reason behind the running joke. In the final cut, Igor steals a brain labeled abnormal, which becomes the central gag of the monster's creation. But originally, the script contained a longer sequence that explained Igor's blunder in more detail. It showed him fumbling nervously, panicking, and then hastily choosing the wrong jar. Brooks cut it for pacing, believing the joke was strong enough without the extended setup. Wilder, however, always felt the longer explanation added extra humor. Even without it, the Abby normal gag remains one of the funniest and most iconic jokes in the entire movie. Rather than use modern sound libraries, Brooks instructed the crew to recreate the eerie sound effects using vintage techniques. Chains were dragged across floors, thunder was recorded in echo chambers, and footsteps were exaggerated with wooden boards. This dedication to authenticity wasn't just for fun. It was part of Brooks's larger vision to make the movie feel exactly like a 1930s horror picture. The sounds helped sell the illusion that the audience was watching a lost Universal classic while still laughing at the parody. The sound design became another subtle but essential layer of the film's genius.
I am the monster!
Yeah, I see that you are the monster.
Peter Boyle's guttural roars and monstrous screams were incredibly demanding. Each time he bellowed in character, it put a strain on his throat. He admitted later that his voice would sometimes be hoarse or sore for days afterward. Boyle pushed through anyway, determined to make the monster sound both terrifying and ridiculous. The sacrifice paid off, since the screams are some of the most memorable parts of his performance. It's another example of how much effort and physical pain went into a role that looked effortless on screen. Comedy often hides real endurance behind the laughs.
Alive! It's alive!
20th Century Fox executives were deeply skeptical about Young Frankenstein. They thought a black and white horror parody would flop with 1970s audiences who were used to bright Technicolor comedies. Instead, the movie became a runaway hit. Made on a budget of around $2.8 million, it grossed more than $80 million, ranking as one of the top comedies of the decade. The success proved Brooks right. Audiences would embrace black and white and old-fashioned styles if the story and humor were strong enough. It silenced skeptics and cemented Young Frankenstein as one of the greatest comedy hits of its time.
I do not want to live!
When Young Frankenstein premiered, critics didn't just call it funny, they praised it as a legitimate horror tribute. Many reviewers noted that it captured the gothic mood of the original Frankenstein movies more effectively than several of Universal's own sequels. The decision to shoot in black and white, use vintage equipment, and carefully mimic old directing styles paid off. Brooks had achieved something extraordinary, a parody that doubled as a love letter. Comedy fans laughed, but horror fans felt genuine appreciation. It was a rare achievement in cinema, a spoof that also stood tall as part of the genre it mocked. The ending, where Dr. Frankenstein transfers some of his own intellect into the monster, was Gene Wilder's idea. Brooks initially resisted, worried that it would slow the comedy down, But Wilder insisted the film should end with an emotional twist, showing that the monster was more than just a joke. The final result worked beautifully, giving the story a surprisingly heartfelt conclusion. It transformed the monster into a character with depth and created a balance between parody and sincerity. That ending is part of why the film remains so beloved. It didn't just mock, it also cared about its characters.
Oh, Frederick, are you all right?
Yes.
In 2003, the United States Library of Congress selected Young Frankenstein for preservation in the National Film Registry. The honor is reserved for movies deemed culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. For a film that began as a silly notebook idea, its inclusion alongside cinematic masterpieces shows its impact. Brooks and Wilder never set out to make history. They set out to make people laugh. But they ended up creating a film so unique, so carefully crafted, and so influential that it became part of America's cultural heritage. It proved that even a parody could achieve true immortality. Gene Hackman shocked everyone by asking Mel Brooks for a comedic role. At the time, Hackman was famous for gritty dramas like The French Connection. He wanted to show a lighter side of himself. Brooks cast him as the blind hermit, and Hackman improvised much of his dialogue, adding hilarious touches like spilling soup and fumbling with cigars. Audiences were floored to see such a serious actor delivering one of the funniest cameos in the movie. Hackman later admitted that making people laugh in Young Frankenstein was one of his most enjoyable acting experiences. Young Frankenstein wasn't just a comedy. It was a monster movie, a parody, and a tribute all rolled into one. From real lab equipment to moving humps and unexpected rock and roll influence, it became one of the most bizarre and brilliant comedies ever made. Which of these facts surprised you the most? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to hit like and subscribe for more movie deep dives.